All right, everybody got their snacks?
Yeah, I've got 3 kinds of protein shakes.
That's great, Arnold. One moment, just waiting on my cloudberry tea to cool. Still hot. It's fine. Go ahead, start whenever you're ready. Thanks, Fenton. Announcers, you ready?
We were born ready. You didn't even know J.M. Gooding existed when you were born. Yeah, but I had a feeling I'd be sitting here one day, ready to hear a story he wrote. Call it a hunch. That sounds like a lot more than a hunch.
All right, we'll work out the semantics later. We need to get started. All right, everyone. Let's recount the tale of how we tried to save Hazel from the underworld, as written by J.M. Gooding.
We're so excited!
Me too. Let's dive in. All right, so we're going to start here at the part where you all show up. In other words, the best part. Here we go. Then we're walking again, deeper into the waiting hall. The Muzak finds an even worse arrangement of Vivaldi, while somewhere ahead a raised voice shouts,
I'm telling you, precious, we already have season tickets. Unless those nasty little hobbitses stores it.
We're close, Kira sighs and picks up her walking pace. Not dramatically, just enough that I have to lengthen my stride to keep up as we weave between neat rows of chairs and patiently waiting souls. The succubus notices too, exchanging the sort of resigned look usually reserved for people who've just remembered they left something important on the stove. You hear it? She asks.
I hear singing.
And? I listen a little harder.
Sports commentary?
Kira sighs. They've spread out. The waiting room opens before us in stages as we round the last bank of chairs. At first, nothing seems particularly unusual. Hundreds of souls sit quietly with numbered tickets in their hands, while the overhead display continues its slow, methodical progression through the queue. Somewhere a little bell chimes. Now serving 74. Then the far corner comes into view. About 30 chairs have been stacked neatly against one wall to clear a patch of floor roughly the size of a small gymnasium. Arnold stands in the middle of it wearing an expression of complete contentment while demonstrating proper squat technique to a semicircle of thoroughly confused shades, none of whom appear to possess enough physical substance for exercise to accomplish anything.
No!
He booms.
Chest up! You died! You did not lose your posture!
Nobody argues with him. Across the room, Fenton has claimed a chair as an impromptu stage. One boot rests confidently on the seat, while his lute accompanies what is clearly the 5th, or perhaps 15th, verse of a heroic ballad about Devine. The instrument's E string is just perceptibly flat, enough to make something deep inside my musical subconscious twitch every time he reaches for it, but nobody else seems to care. Several listeners are completely captivated. The reception desk has become a broadcast booth. The two announcers have somehow acquired matching chairs and are leaning over the secretary's workspace with absolute professional commitment while an ancient television flickers between them.
And Palmer has elected to lay it up here, the first announcer says.
A conservative choice for sure, the other one says.
But after Thursday's performance, perhaps exactly the right one.
The secretary is no longer behind the desk. She's standing a few feet away with the exhausted patience of someone who has spent the better part of eternity in customer service, facing a small gray figure who's clutching a polished brass nameplate protectively against his chest.
I just need you to return that, sir.
No!
It has my name on it.
It's my precious.
It literally has my name on it.
No!
It isn't treasure. Gollum hugs the nameplate tighter.
Precious.
The secretary closes her eyes for a long moment before opening them again with remarkable professionalism. I'm going to ask one more time. Kira exhales slowly through her nose. I see we've reached that stage. The little knot of chaos pauses just long enough for someone to acknowledge us. JM, Hazel calls, lifting a paper cup in greeting from somewhere near the middle of the room. They're sitting comfortably with ticket X-000001 resting in their lap, looking less like someone awaiting rescue and more like someone who's accidentally wandered into an unusually committed community theater production. Good timing. Hey, this is Kira. We're here to get you out, I tell them. You ready to go? Hazel gestures vaguely at the surrounding spectacle. Arnold's tried motivation. Fenton's on verse 31. The commentators have been covering golf since yesterday, and Gollum's going to leave here with a restraining order. 32, Fenton corrects without missing a chord. Hazel nods. Right, 32. Arnold straightens, grinning broadly as though he'd just remembered the next phase of a carefully planned operation. He strides over to Hazel, pointing an enormous finger in their direction, and asks, with complete sincerity, There! You've summoned Kira and JM. Are you ready to get to the chopper? Hazel smiles apologetically. No. Arnold nods once, accepting the setback with admirable professionalism. Okay, we try something different. He pivots toward 3 nearby shades. You! Come! The 3 exchange uncertain looks before wandering over. Stand here. Why? One asks. I need resistance. They shrug and step into position. Arnold drops into a push-up, and the laws governing the underworld immediately betray him. The shades remain exactly where they are while Arnold passes cleanly between their legs on the way down, rises again on the other side, and repeats the motion with perfect form. The effect is less elite fitness routine than industrial sewing machine. The announcers don't miss a beat. An unexpected development, the first announcer says. Remarkable core strength, the second begins. But questionable understanding of metaphysics. Ha! But tremendous commitment, the first announcer adds. Hazel applauds politely while the secretary and Gollum continue to haggle over the nameplate. Better, they say. Not there yet, though. Arnold points decisively toward the ceiling. Then we continue. Across the room, Fenton smiles as though this is precisely the encouragement he'd been hoping for, and launches without hesitation into the next verse of the Ballad of Devine. The slightly flat E string twangs again, somewhere between charming and criminal, while Gollum hugs the secretary's brass nameplate to his chest and hisses at anyone foolish enough to suggest it might, in fact, belong to someone else. The secretary opens her mouth, thinks better of it, and silently writes something else on the incident form instead. Hazel turns the paper cup slowly between their hands before looking back at me. Truth is, I don't even know how I got here exactly. The coffee's terrible, sure. They pause, their attention wandering for just a moment towards someone sitting a few seats away. From where I'm standing, all I can really make out is the silhouette of another figure, head bowed slightly, as though listening to whatever story Hazel had been telling before we interrupted. Hazel smiles, almost absent-mindedly, before looking back at me. But it's quiet here. Everybody's been nice. Can I just stay a little longer? Kira closes her eyes for a long moment, then exhales through her nose with the resigned patience of someone who's just solved an incredibly complicated problem by asking the one question everyone else forgot. Well, she says, that explains the incident report. Arnold slowly sinks to the floor with a theatrical, defeated while Fenton's hand stops halfway through another verse and the unfinished chord hangs awkwardly in the air. The announcers exchange a glance over the secretary's desk. Gollum stares at Hazel in complete disbelief before looking down at the brass nameplate in his hands, and somewhere behind us, even the waiting souls seem mildly invested in how this is going to end.
You.
Gollum says.
What's this?
I never said I wanted rescuing, Hazel replies. Nobody asked, Arnold mutters from the floor. Oh, apparently not, says one of the announcers. The secretary reaches over, gently removes her nameplate from Gollum's now limp fingers, sets it back on the desk where it belongs, smooths it with one hand, and nods to herself. I had wondered. Kira smiles in exactly the way she does whenever she's decided a conversation has gone on long enough. Very well. Then all of you, she glances around the room at Arnold, Fenton, the announcers, and Gollum. Back where you belong. She snaps her fingers. The stacked chairs are suddenly back in neat rows. The reception desk belongs to the receptionist again. The golf tournament vanishes. Finton's unfinished ballad disappears somewhere into the ether. Arnold, Gollum, and the others simply aren't there anymore, and the waiting room settles so quickly back into its gentle murmur that it's almost difficult to remember they'd been there at all. Hazel looks around the suddenly quiet room before turning back to us with an amused little smile. "You sure you're okay?" I ask. "Yeah." Their eyes drift briefly toward the indistinct figure a few chairs away before returning to me. "I'm fine." I nod. "All right." Kira smiles. A heartbeat later, I'm back in my basement, still wearing socks. Git remains convinced I've modified files that apparently don't exist. Chuck is still happily eating Relay, one damp paragraph at a time, and my coffee is still warm. I stare at the terminal for a long moment before shaking my head. "You know," I mutter to nobody in particular, "I still think the underworld made more sense." All right, that's it, everybody. What did you think? What was the lesson here? I'm curious what you all think of that.
Oh, I got it. The lesson is that shades in the underworld need to train their core strength.
No, Arnold.
I know. The lesson is that the underworld is real, and we should all be scared of it. Also, I want a brass nameplate.
I'll take the nameplate into consideration, but no, that's not it either.
Hey, I've got this one. The lesson is that golf isn't nearly as boring as we all think it is.
Yeah, I'm gonna step in and tell you right now that's wrong too.
Clearly, the lesson here is that not everyone needs saving.
Yes, Finton, that's correct. How did you figure it out?
They said so in the story. If you were even halfway paying attention, you would have gotten it.
Hey, wait a second. Are you calling me stupid?
Yes, Arnold, that's exactly what I'm doing.
Okay. I just had to check. Continue.
Now, in my case, Bradley, I do need saving, just so we're clear.
I understand, Finton. I'm working on it.
Sure you are. Also, this story from J.M. Gooding was quite good. You really should read it on the Save This Draft podcast.
Finton, you remembered the name.
Oh, would you look at that? It's a miracle. Speaking of miracles, when is the new Devine series chapter coming out, Bradley?
Roll the intro music. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 77 of the Saved as Draft podcast. A big thank you to J.M. Gooding for writing that story for this week's intro. What I read was the roughly second half of the story, so be sure to check the show notes for a link to see the full thing. It all started as a joke in my subscriber chat, and next thing you know, it was here on the show. But I do appreciate J.M. Gooding and his amazing writing as always. I feel like he did a great job with all the characters. So for this week's episode, I've got a pretty standard selection for you this week. We'll have our shout-outs, our power-up prompt stories, our writing discussion, and then, of course, we'll look at what's happening next week on Substack. Now, I don't have an interview for you this week, but next week, I'll be sitting down with M. Brandon Robbins, who was our lightweight bracket winner from May's Halls of Pandemonium Challenge. Now, as you may know, challenge winners get special interview slots where people can submit questions of their own in the community to be asked during the recording of the interview. So, feel free to send me your questions directly or check the show notes for a link to the thread where you can submit your questions. And if you prefer, you can also drop them in the comments. Just make it clear that that's what it's for. Also, I recently announced that I'll be joining Stefan Pasek once more for our monthly poetry reading live on Substack next week. This Substack Live series involves both of us reading community-submitted poems and discussing our thoughts. So, if you write poetry and you want us to read your work on the stream, I'll include a link to that submission thread as well in the show notes. We'll get to as many as we can, and I choose poems personally in the order they were submitted, just so you're all aware. But yeah, we usually go for about an hour and a half, maybe sometimes close to 2 hours on the live stream there. It's a ton of fun. This will be our third one, like I mentioned, so I'm really excited to do it again, and the work is always amazing. So please, feel free to submit poetry if you write it. And one last thing. I wanted to shout out friend of the show, Audrey Anderson, who just published a brand new book co-written with her partner. Station Between Worlds, Journey to Jolly Hollow is available right now in paperback and ebook formats. Here's the summary. Skeptic Sophia may be at the top of her class, but she has never been able to choose the right guy. Hot-headed Hux is one outburst away from being shipped off to a school in the mountains, hundreds of miles from his friends in Sage City. For both of them, it feels like the end of the world. But then Sophia, Hux, and their best friend Pete stumble into the Station Between Worlds. An interdimensional train carries them to Jolly Hollow, a world of alchemists, witches, and demons, teetering on the verge of revolution. Before they can make sense of anything, the friends are torn apart. As each searches for the others, Sophia finds herself trapped in Bloodstone Castle and at the mercy of a mysterious stranger, while Hux discovers abilities that may be connected to the mother he has never known. With dark forces closing in, they must decide whom to trust if they hope to find one another and make it back to their own world alive. Now, I've been following this project for over a year now, and obviously Audrey and I discussed it during her interview on the show last year, so I'm really excited for both of them, and I'm just so happy that this book is out in the world and people can read it. If you're curious, I'll also leave a link to where you can read the first chapter on Audrey's publication here on Substack if you'd like a little sample, but I highly recommend it. I already grabbed my copy. All right, that's it for housekeeping this week. Next up, we'll take a look at our community spotlight. This week's Community Spotlight is on Johanna C. Eschwald. Johanna is a writer of fiction with a touch of the fantastical and poetry about the human condition. She's also host of the great binge reading of Serialized Fiction Club and The Master of Illusions for Nightingale Press. I've read and enjoyed a lot of Johanna's work, but this week I wanted to highlight her excellent art skills. Earlier this week, she posted a note asking for folks to give her simple drawing prompts so she could practice her art. Sounds like a win-win to me, so I asked for a squirrel trying to play a video game. Johanna absolutely delivered. I'll include a link in the show notes to the thread where you can check out all the art that she did, as well as a link to her profile. She's really, really amazing, both at art and at writing, so please check out both. And thank you to Johanna for being an amazing part of this community and for all the work that you do, especially over at Nightingale Press. We really appreciate you. All right. Next up is our weekly shoutouts. But first, a word from this week's sponsor. Today's episode of the Saved as Draft podcast is sponsored by Red Shirt Resorts. Hey there, my name is Barry Ashland, and I'm a character created by Bradley Ramsey. Let me ask you something. Do you ever get tired of being thrown into stories against your will? Starting to feel like you don't have any control over your life? Lying awake at night wondering if you'll ever get a happy ending? I'm here to tell you, you're not alone. There are millions of other characters out there struggling with similar issues, which is why Red Shirt Resorts is here to help. You see, at Red Shirt Resorts, we understand that writers are horrible. They love torturing us, all while calling it character development. They dress us in red shirts so people know we're expendable. But just because your life is expendable doesn't mean your sanity has to be as well. We all deserve a break from existential fear from time to time. For one small, non-refundable, recurring fee, you can join us here in paradise, far away from any authors, writers, or plotters looking to turn your entire life into an outline. Are you ready to wear that red shirt with pride? Step off the page and into a story of your own making. Call Red Shirt Resorts today and book your trip. All right, and we're back. Every week on Tuesday, I post a thread in my subscriber chat where you can share links to your latest work for a chance to be featured on one of 2 shows, including this one. I pick 5 links at random each week for this segment where I offer my thoughts and narrate an excerpt from each piece as well. So, let's dive in and see what we got for this week's shoutouts. First up this week is Jack by Anomie. This is a phenomenal horror poem about a sleep paralysis demon of the same name. It becomes clear in the first few lines what's going on, but that only serves to set the stage for some truly delicious dread as it goes on. The writing here is on another level. There are so many standout lines, but it's the way the author uses imagery and sensory descriptions that really sells the atmosphere of the piece. Jack, as a character, is terrifying to imagine. The way the poem describes the torture and helplessness of the protagonist is also brilliant. It's intense horror, not for the faint of heart, but if you decide to read this one, I promise you won't be disappointed. Let's check out an excerpt. He doesn't have eyes, but I can feel him checking his watch. He smells of gun oil and the cold, dead air at the bottom of a missile silo. Then he moves, a silent landslide of pure shadow, and sits squarely on my chest. His fingers are 10 long, rusty nails, squeezing my ribs with a practiced, rhythmic routine. 1, 2, 3, compress. Not again. I'm begging. He knows the exact structural limits of a human cage. He wants to wring the air out of my lungs like dirty water from a rag, collecting my breath to stack it neatly in the dark. My teeth are fused together, but inside the panic of my skull, I am screaming. Jack, please! Not again! I shouldn't like this dream. Let me back! Let me back, Jack! I need to wake up, Jack! I want to love! I need the living, breathing, beautiful Jack adorned in black. He doesn't care about the pleading. The weight spreads, heavy, and pins my shins to the mattress. I am completely immobilized, a useless specimen under his boots. Good golly, Miss Molly. What a way to start the shoutouts this week. That was amazing. Remember to check the show notes for a link to all of these. Our second shoutout this week is A Child Nameless, Part 1 by Tilting at Windmills. This one's another pleasant surprise. It's a story that sets up an incredibly rich and spiritual world that immediately grabbed my attention. Our character is someone who is part of a tribal group, and they are on a sort of coming-of-age quest to discover their true name. The way the story lays out the world, the societal structure, the spiritual elements, it all ties together really beautifully. There's a reverence and respect to each detail that made it feel authentic and genuine throughout. It feels like folklore in the best way. Like this is a story passed down through generations, gaining and losing details along the way. And it's a dense opener, to be sure, but it really sets things up nicely. And I enjoyed the preview of the next chapter at the end. That was a really nice touch. Let's check out an excerpt. A crack sounded from beyond the ridge, the snap of a thick branch under snow. It was a cold reminder that he could not afford to linger in the open. Despite his fatigue, he scanned the tree line one last time. Assured no dangers lurked, he strode forward, using his ash spear for stability as he crossed the deep drifts. Near the center of the clearing, he paused to study a towering winter pine, nodded to himself, and trotted toward it. He ducked beneath the lowest limbs, where the spreading arms offered an ideal refuge. The dense green roof hung shoulder-high at the edges, but rose to twice that near the massive trunk. The thick layers of needles would block the icy wind, while the deep carpet of debris beneath would soften his bedroll. This will do, he thought, unstrapping his snowshoes. I love it. Nice little slice of atmosphere there. You can kind of get a feel for the world and the tone. Really great stuff, though. Check it out. And like I said, I love how there's a preview of the next chapter at the end. That little format choice there is really cool. Honestly, I'm thinking about using it myself. Our third shout out this week is Forever the Understanding Girl by Rebecca Watson. Now, for those who aren't familiar with Rebecca's poetry, first of all, please get familiar. Her work is incredible, and I'll explain why with this piece here. You see, Rebecca's poetry is what I would call the epitome of tough love. It's empathetic, genuine, raw, and vulnerable, but it asks the same of you. Poems like this one lay a kind hand on your shoulder before punching you right in the stomach. It's not about hurting you, it's about getting you on the same page so the message really sinks in. Case in point, this piece is about someone who played a very specific role in their past throughout past relationships. I love the term understanding girl here to describe that. And honestly, I feel like I've been the understanding guy my whole life, so I get it. But beyond relatable themes and heavy truths, what really makes Rebecca's work special is how she brings these things to the forefront with some truly inspired writing. She finds beauty even in sorrow, and that, in my mind, is what great poetry is all about. Let's check out an excerpt. I memorize the pauses, the flinches, the reasons hidden beneath your anger. I translated silence into sorrow, distance into exhaustion, cruelty into you've just been through a lot. I made homes out of explanations. I could understand everyone, the ones who left, the ones who lied, the ones who loved me only halfway. Somehow, there was always a reason. Oh man, that poetry, it just hits every single time. Incredible work. Please check it out. Like I said, you'll find links to all of these in the show notes. Our fourth shout out this week is Chapter 1 Serenity by Alexander Avelies. So, this is the first of 4 chapters in a zombie apocalypse story called Honor and Extinction, which is a sweet name, by the way. The author is celebrating 40 subscribers by posting a new chapter each week. So congrats to Alexander, of course, on that milestone. Let's talk about the story here. This one's really interesting. I don't know why, but I expected it to open after the beginning of the zombie apocalypse. It subverts expectations, though, by spending most of the first chapter within the day in the life of the main character. It reminds me of that Dawn of the Dead remake they did, where the movie starts fine and then things take a left turn into horror. Now, I prefer this kind of setup because it lulls the reader into a false sense of security. The concept here about a FedEx employee finding out the zombie apocalypse has begun while his infant son sleeps in the next room is really, really cool. I'm immediately curious to see how this will progress. And I would call this a successful first chapter on that point alone. Let's check out an excerpt. 2 hours. Considering she sent this over my lunch break, she can't be serious about the time frame. I load up the postal unit charts and get back to routing packages. Joan's personal requests always come after completion of more important work. The microwave beeps, and I take out the little shits that burn my fingers and tongue while I walk back to the table. After working for roughly 10 minutes, I look in the corner of the screen. 2:30. Jesus. Time flies when your eyes are mesmerized by pixels on a screen. Joan's message pops back into my brain, and I quickly search for the MIDs she mentioned. My phone buzzes next to me as I find the first one coming from Sacramento. Hello? Oberon, if you don't fix those routing addresses, I'm going to put you on the bar. I always questioned her line of thinking. Why can't she do it herself if she knows what has to be done? Same goes for the IRS, too, though no one's ever fixed that system. I'm working on it right now, Joan. Silence. I know, it's miraculous. Don't let the flies fly into your mouth, Joan. Otherwise they'll nest in your dentures. You little... Damn it, Obi, shut up and look at the news. There's no way that's real. Joan still watches the news? She's a rare old breed. Why? What's happening? Haven't your parents ever told you to do something without asking questions? Yes. And that got them killed. Right. I apologize. Never mind that, Obi. Just turn on the news channel, please. Excellent work. Really great opening chapter there. Like I said, it gets you hooked in right away. If you like zombie fiction, it's a solid recommendation from me. And our final shout out this week is Slipper's Dare by Stories Sown with Hope. This is a short story about a fish who, after being peer pressured into a dare, almost becomes a human's dinner. Our protagonist, Slipper, manages to be quite the endearing character despite never saying a word. I love how this story uses descriptions and the fish's body language to convey emotions. There's a wholesome story here about the bond we have with our pets and animals, or in this case, fish, and how we cross paths with them in our lives. It's the kind of easy reading that leaves a smile on your face, but there's some tension in there to keep things suspenseful and interesting. Let's check out an excerpt. Slipper landed at the feet of a fisherman's son. The air stung. She couldn't catch a breath. She flopped helplessly at Rosen's feet. Ho-ho! There's our dinner! Randy clapped his son on the shoulder. How's that for fishing? Dinner just came to us. Rosen noticed her silver scales, the writhing body, and the large gray eyes. Did it blink? Have lashes? Was that a tear? Randy fastened Slipper on a stringer with the earlier catch of 2 smaller fish and set that into a large bucket of water. Slipper stopped thrashing once she was in the water, but it wasn't easy to breathe in the bucket. She would have to stay calm. What were they saying? She had tried to concentrate on the words. She had heard human words before at the docks and near fishing boats. But this? Horrors. The big man was talking about awful, dreadful, tortuous things. Randy chatted about a frying pan, dipping the fish in egg, cornmeal breading, hot oil. Slipper's tail seized and convulsed. Rosen, who was watching the fish, swallowed hard. Have you ever had a pet, Dad? What's that like? Amazing work from everyone this week. Really exciting to see such a mix of familiar and fresh faces in the shoutouts as well. So thank you to everyone who submitted links. And remember, you can drop links to all of your work every Tuesday in my subscriber chat for a chance to get featured right here on the show. Next up, we'll take a look at this week's Wandering Prompt winner. Welcome, one and all, to this week's Wandering Prompt Awards ceremony. Last week's hidden prompt on the podcast asked for a story about a mysterious egg, and J. Allen Winchester was the first to post a story in response. That's right. It inspired me to go out and find a mysterious egg of my own.
Was that your egg just now?
Yeah? Why?
How long has it been growling like that?
Hey guys, I'll take it from here. You may want to move that egg, by the way. Gollum and Schmeagol found out about it, and now they're plotting about how they can become the hatchlings' godparents. It's a whole thing. Uh-oh. Better get out of here before they start suggesting names.
Yeah, let's skedaddle.
You know, I can't remember the last time I heard the word skedaddle. Anyway, welcome everyone. As my announcer friends mentioned, last week's Wandering Prompt winner was J. Allen Winchester with a story titled The Forgotten Cosmic Egg. Jaden came in at just 2 words under the limit, and he used that space beautifully here. This is a fantastic entry into a wider universe of his, as it stars characters that I know quite well as a longtime fan. Not only that, but the ending, when the egg hatches, reveals that this was secretly the origin story for another longtime member of the Imaginings universe. You know I love me some Easter eggs and connections. The more the merrier. And of course, Jaden's iconic writing shines here with a beautiful opening and stunning imagery throughout. Let's check out an extended excerpt from The Forgotten Cosmic Egg. Before he could respond, the Fae turned to sprint across the broken ground behind them. Jay turned to take in the area. The door had manifested in ruins almost completely overtaken by nature. While his companion explored, he examined the structure's walls. The elements had eroded any identifying markings, so he walked after the Fae, feeling more curious with each step about the civilization that once inhabited the place. "Jay!" the Fae called enthusiastically. "Come look what I found!" Quickening his boots' pace on the grass and cracked stone, the Demiurge's glowing eyes discovered the ruins were less overtaken deeper in. While he could not make out anything identifying, he recognized a familiar design to the structure. The pathway his muse had taken was lined with broken pedestals and columns, and he noticed the alignment facing the outside platform as intentional. "Jay, I think I found a shrine!" The plump Fae danced around a broken stone altar with moss and vines covering the remnants. There was a specific part that remained where a mossy stone rested upright. The pattern at its base made the mage wonder if something had once supported it, acclimating to the position as the altar gradually deteriorated around it. "Isn't it beautiful?" she asked him with a wide grin. "I felt potential energy coming from this direction, so I followed it. I think the egg is why we're here." Rather than respond, Jay's expression fell further into sorrow. The Fae tilted her head curiously, trying to grasp the reason for his sadness. She watched the horned mage approach the egg. His large hand reached to graze the moss under clawed fingertips. The furrowed brow conveyed his heartache to her. "Jay, what's wrong?" "I thought this world felt lonely when you first opened the door." He spoke in a hollow voice as his hand stroked the weathered surface of the egg. "Now, I see it was this sole being left in a place, withering away in time." The Fae looked from his orange and yellow eyes down to his face, to his shoulder and arm, ending where his strong hand gingerly touched the egg. She had sensed energy within it, but it didn't feel lonely to her, just dormant. A small smile spread on her lips as she reached to touch his hand. And before we wrap up, Jaden messaged me with some really cool context surrounding this story. Slight spoiler, but at the end of the story here, it's revealed that a cat was inside the egg, and I recognize this immediately as the cat based on Jaden's real-life feline friend, Archie. So Jaden explained the connection, saying the ending is actually almost exactly the way that they first met Archie at the shelter before they adopted him in real life. Jaden told me that when he approached the bench on a pillow that Archie had curled up on, he said his name and the cat opened his eyes, looked at him, and it was like he'd been waiting for them. When Chelsea, his wife, got through all the cats that swarmed her, he stood up to stretch and walked onto her chest to curl up again. That was what Jaden thought of when he heard the prompt on last week's episode, and he knew it was time to share Archie's origin story. And there's more to come too. So, amazing work from Jaden this week. And remember, each episode of the podcast here contains a brand new wandering prompt hidden somewhere in the audio of the episode. Keep an ear out for it, and if you're the first to respond with a link in the show notes, you'll get featured right here in this segment on the following week's episode. Now, I've done the joke before where I put the wandering prompt here after mentioning it, so I'm not going to do that again. But anyway, let's check out this week's post-apocalyptic power-up prompt stories next. All right, this week's power-up prompt was post-apocalyptic, and I based the idea partially off an old story of mine from many years ago. Your setting was the scorched wasteland, your character was the nomad, and your conflict was to play or sabotage the game from the prompt, where a warlord with incredible power decides to host a race, promising the winner anything their heart desires. Now let's dive in and check out this week's entries, where I'll share my thoughts about each one and what stood out to me the most. First up is The Splintered Hinterland by Gregory Blair. Now, listeners of the show may note that Gregory has been a steady participant in the power-up prompts since they returned after May's challenge. And to be fair, Gregory was also a stalwart supporter of the challenge as well. The point is that Gregory shows up, and every week he always brings his A-game. So with this one, he offers up a rich and immersive post-apocalyptic world that oozes Mad Max vibes in the best way possible. There's some really nice, chunky world building at the beginning that gives way to character drama and a twist that I was not expecting in the final act. The reveal of our protagonist's true identity was a stroke of narrative brilliance, and it added so much weight to the story, including the ending. A fantastic way to kick off our power-up prompts this week. Our next power-up prompt story this week is Relay by J.M. Gooding. Now, with this one, I knew J.M. had taken things in his own direction, but beyond that, I had no idea what to expect. What I got here is perhaps the most creative and unique take on the prompt that I can possibly imagine, and I genuinely mean that. The brilliance here is how he pulls in a deeper tension behind the race itself. Not only that, but the story foreshadows the big reveal by consistently showing us that legends are rarely the entire story. It creates this atmosphere of skepticism, helped in part by our protagonist, who is suspicious of the circumstances the entire time. But yes, the reveal about the race itself immediately made me think of the Death Stranding games written by Hideo Kojima. There's similar themes here that immediately resonated with me. It's not at all the direction I was expecting, but it feels very natural and logical once the pieces fall into place. And I say this every time I read one of JM's stories, and I'm going to keep saying it until he's a best-selling author with more movie deals than opinions about tacos. Everyone should be reading this author. His work defies genres, and as a result, there's something for everyone. If you want to get started with this story, find a link to this and all our power-up prompt stories this week in the show notes. Our next power-up prompt story this week is Wastelands by Gracie Autumn. Now, I could be wrong here, but I think this is Gracie's first power-up prompt story. If not, it's the first one that they've done in a while, but man, I hope we see more from them, because this was really good. The entire piece is just dripping with style. The writing is so sharp, it's well-paced, and the characters have really creative and cool names like Wolf Kid and Spider. And don't even get me started on the dialogue. It just brings everything together in this style, and it sticks the landing every single time. There's also a shift here midway through the story where we get to see through the POV of the warlord from the prompt, who is named Haywire in this case. Another great name. So this POV shift takes us into a tense situation as Haywire's paranoia starts to get the better of them. The story here ends on the most brutal cliffhanger that I've seen since like Halo 2 back in the day. It's gnarly. So Gracie, if you're listening, please let us know when you post the next part, because I will personally guarantee that it gets a shout out on the show here. You've got me entirely invested in this story. Great work. Our next power-up prompt story this week is The Highway to Hell by Genesis McClure, aka Every Root, Every Thorn. And once again, we rejoin our characters from this author's connected universe. There's even a mention of the prior prompt's Forlorn Island in the first line. What's really impressive about this, and the author's other recent pieces, is of course the fact that they're all part of a larger storyline. And I've said this each week, but it bears repeating, especially for new listeners. If you like large, multifaceted, sprawling, multi-universe settings, you're going to love this author's work. And at this point, we're getting references to not only that world, but to prior power-up prompts as well. And I've mentioned it before, but it's so cool to see. I love this kind of stuff. And where this story stands out in particular, besides the excellent pacing and the POV switches that I've mentioned I love from this author, is the sheer number of references to other popular worlds or series. We've got a Lord of the Rings reference, we've got a Mad Max reference, I mean, hell, we've even got a Thundercats reference in this story. It's insanely fun work from this author as always. Be sure to check it out at the link in the show notes. And our next power-up prompt story is actually a poem titled After the Bombs Dropped by Mina Howell. So Mina told me this was a Fallout-inspired poem, and you know that set off all the alarms for the gamer and writer in me and got me really excited to talk about this one. And I'm telling you right now, folks, it is really good. It captures the spirit of the series perfectly, showing how humanity fell apart in the wake of the apocalypse. And of course, our true colors come out after the end of the world as well. Humans are rotted from within, as one line says. The poem also makes references to the main story of Fallout 4, which Mina mentions she's currently playing. In that game, your character is searching for their child after waking up underground in a vault after the bombs fell. And I love the subtle nods here as well about the journey and what the character is seeking. Also, I gotta say, I love the ending of this poem so much that I'm going to break my own rules here and read you the final stanza because it is that good. Check it out. Here's the final stanza from Mina's poem this week. What can one person do when their life is held in stasis, with the extinction of give and take, and heaven is a radiationless oasis? They look at me like I'm their messiah, but death and I are on a first-name basis. Talk about a mic drop, right? My only problem with this poem is that now I'm going to have to reinstall Fallout 4. Seriously, though, this was excellent. Check the link in the show notes to read the full entry. All right, and our final power-up prompt story this week is... Wandering Prompt, Episode 77. Write a story or poem that details a creation myth about how the world came to be. 1,000 words or less. First to post a link in the comments wins. Good luck. Oh, wow. Sorry about that, folks. Let's try this again. Our last power-up prompt story this week is The Heroic Nomad by Bradley Hurt. So once again, Bradley's approach here offers some truly inspiring creativity. In this piece, we begin with a wholesome interaction between our nomad character and a dog who seems to be lost. From there, we meet up with another character and ultimately the warlord, but where Bradley added his signature flair this week was the part of the story that details the magic in this world. That's right, folks. We've got post-apocalyptic magic going on. I never would have thought to bring in an element like that, but I was immediately excited when it was first revealed here. It allows the stakes to be so much higher, seeing as how magic could theoretically save this world that had long ago supposedly ended. And by the end, we do get a very satisfying conclusion. I also appreciate that Bradley made sure that the dog ends up in a good place, even if it's not where everyone necessarily wanted him to be. I respect authors that treat animals right, so he gets extra points for that one. And that's why he's my name twin. And yes, amazing work from everyone this week. Phenomenal stories. And you can look forward to the next Power Up prompt going live this Sunday, July 12th. In the meantime, let's keep things rolling with our weekly writing discussion. But first, a quick mindful moment. Hey there. This is Chill Bradley, here with this week's mindful moment. Here's a quote to consider. Whether you're keeping a journal or writing as meditation, it's the same thing. What's important is you're having a relationship with your mind. Natalie Goldberg. Now, most writers would be terrified at the prospect of having a relationship with their own mind. I myself would not want to live in my stories or my own head, for example. But a relationship with your mind is important. It's about recognizing your own thoughts and feelings. It's about identifying those loops that you get trapped in. You know the ones I'm talking about. The anxiety, the overthinking, the constant decision fatigue. The reason I love practicing mindfulness is that it allows me to observe recognize, and ultimately let go of the thoughts that don't serve me. It's a way to clear your mind that works, and it makes space for more creativity. And hey, if you like the sound of that, you can join me, Jill Bradley, every week on Dream Drafts, a new meditation and mindfulness podcast releasing every Monday for writers and creatives. Episode 1 comes out this Monday, July 13th, but paid subscribers can listen right now. And for just $5 a month, you can get 1 week early access to new episodes every Monday as well. I hope you'll join me over there for some quiet time, some rest, and some reflection. Regardless of what your mind or other people might tell you, you deserve rest as much as anyone else. Thank you for listening as always. Back to the show. And we're back. This week's writing discussion is all about writing creation myths. Now, as a writer, I'm no stranger to a good old-fashioned existential crisis. Last week on the podcast here, the writing discussion was about the story you never wrote. Mine was called Life is But a Dream, and, well, technically I did write it. Except it was back in high school, and that draft is long, long gone. But a core part of the story was its creation myth, something I wrote to explain the entire world of the story and why, in this case, death is only the beginning. Writing a creation myth felt really good at the time. It felt like an answer to a question that I know I'd never get in real life. You see, back then, I was terrified of so many things, dying being one of them, and as I got older, I got increasingly frustrated with just how little we actually know about the universe and our reality. Writing, for me, was a way to handle that. In the absence of answers, I realized that anything is possible. I wrote a creation myth to answer the questions that scared me. I came up with an answer, and then I lived it in the story. And that's why this week's writing discussion is all about writing creation myths. I think it's an important aspect of world building in some stories, not all, but I want to hear about yours and if you have any. And remember, if you participate in these weekly threads over on my subscriber chat, I will read your responses right here on the show. So, with that being said, let's dive in and see what you had to say this week. First up, Every Root, Every Thorn says, my universe was created as a simulation where a person found a realistic enough machine to live out playing video games, but when you control everything and there's no longer consequences, the game is pushed beyond the limits to something that takes the word challenge so serious that it's hard to tell what is reality and what isn't, or what, if anything, will finally push you outside of the cycle of reincarnation that has you trapped here. Wow. That is quite the description. I love that. And yeah, having read a lot of Every Root, Every Thorn's work, as we heard about from their power-up prompts, they always do really cool stuff. Their world is just, it's so massive in scope, and there's so many elements and moving parts. This was a great little pitch here, though. Got me super interested. I'm already a fan, but if I wasn't, this would have done it. So that's a great one to start us off. Next up, J.M. Gooding says, that's an oddly specific question. I know. So JM says, how the universe came to be. I don't know. Ask Neil deGrasse Tyson, or Jesus, or the Incas, or the Greeks. Everybody seems to have an opinion. Personally, my favorite explanation is the one we're still testing. About 13.8 billion years ago, the universe began in an incredibly hot, dense state and has been expanding ever since. If our current understanding is right, it will keep expanding until stars die, black holes evaporate, and eventually there isn't enough free energy left for anything interesting to happen. Carl Sagan once said, the cosmos is all that ever is, or ever was, or ever will be. The Big Freeze simply adds, eventually it won't even be interesting. That probably explains why none of my worlds have creation myths. My stories are usually grounded in what we currently understand about reality. Understand, not necessarily know. So I've never felt the need to invent an origin story for the universe itself. My words inherit the same unanswered questions we do. Instead, I tend to ask a different question. If one thing changed, what would people do next? A phenomenal response from J.M. Gooding. So many good elements here. Yeah, let's start from the top. I mean, yes, everyone has a different story, right, across different cultures, across science and stuff like that. One thing I'll say is that with Life is But a Dream, I actually incorporated the Big Bang and explained it in my creation myth, which I thought was fun. But yeah, no, I like the idea of, basing things on our universe, on our reality, but then tweaking things and seeing how that ripple effect plays out. And I've seen that in action across JM's work, and I think that's a great way of describing it. And a perfectly valid approach, too. I really love that we got that perspective here. So thank you, as always, my friend, for the fantastic answer. Next up, Anton Anderson says, if you want to know, there's a whole series of mine called Saracetes? I apologize if I mispronounced that. The first few scrolls tell the Saxum's version of how the world of The Seeker's universe was created. In short, 4 gods were bored and lonely, and so they decided to create matter, and then more interesting matter, and then plant life, and then animal life, and then sapient life. No, I love that, though, because honestly, sometimes, I think I've seen other stories where it was a similar concept where it's like, well, the world exists because some really powerful gods were bored and just wanted something to do, right? And honestly, that could be the answer. It could be something that simple, which is why I like that Anton, kind of considered that in his universe here. And yeah, the Seeker's universe is fantastic. I actually have some copies of his books that I'm eager to talk about soon. I was going to film a video about them, but that's neither here nor there. Really great stuff. Definitely check out what Anton's doing, especially his recently released branching narrative story. Again, a little bit of a tangent there, but Anton does great work is what I'm saying. Next up, Peter Tutahunga Carr says, my fantasy world has 2 with a third pending. One is objectively real, so in the other in microcosm, because that's the nature of belief within the wider reality. Ergo, the third will be sufficiently real too. My inspiration was partly that all the collected myths I read as a kid started with a creation myth, but also Jarek is possibly transitioning from being a mortal to being a god. What is the foundation for that possibility? Good stuff, good stuff. I like this idea of a character transitioning from being a mortal to a god and having to kind of directly reconcile with the creation myth here. That's really interesting. I also like how, he mentions that the third will be sufficiently real, right? Like the nature of reality, the nature of belief, and what is real. Fantastic themes there. So thank you for that amazing response. Next up, J. Allen Winchester says, do I have a creation myth? Insert wicked laughter. Eclipse, Nature Calls, Court of Night, Thicker Than Blood, Order of the Reaper, Legacy of the Solar Order, Vapor Fang, Legends of Valorond, even the Imaginings universe now. I think I call myself a fantasy adventure author because of how deep I delve into creation in my world building. This is probably influenced by my Christian upbringing that led into my pagan path. Ultimately, realizing I was an omniist is most likely why writing creation myths for almost every world I build. A shared core that evolves its own essence based on the unique aspects of the story is what I have observed in mythology. I do get some inspiration from beyond that helps too. I don't always put the creation myth in the story, but when I do, it becomes a plot point. In the Eclipse Saga, I have actually written the myth into one of the early chapters of the sequel, and it gives the protagonist his next idea of how to course correct the world by going back to its roots. I actually wrote the creation of the Nature Calls saga and shared it here on Substack, and there is a link there. Fantastic. It is narrated in the voice of the character within the story, which I've been curious if fans will be able to name before the end of winter. Court of Night has a narrator who shares the creation myth with the protagonist to explain how they got into the situation they're in. It is a secret route, so the audience can learn some lore by playing through the different routes. That is, of course, a branching narrative story. I've heard about that one. Thicker Than Blood's creation is slowly revealed over the course of the series, as there were actions that have caused ripples throughout time that impact the story. Order of the Reaper has a similar creation where a fall started the circumstances the characters end up in, so the story gradually unravels over time. Legacy of the Solar Order was when I tackled the origins of Greek mythology with my own words. Unlike Dodecatheon, where I left it as a myth already told, Solar Order fleshed out the birth of chaos and its role in the cosmos. It doesn't really get focused on until midway through the series, when the main goal shifts for the Order. Vapor Fang's creation myth isn't exactly a part of the story. I have it in the World Bible, but at this point in development it isn't in the plot at this time. Legends of Valorond is the TTRPG world I created when I started DMing. I had to establish Valorond, so the creation myth is something the players learn from the various perspectives of the world's culture that they encounter. The overarching purpose of the main campaign is the players are the group who introduce multicultural relationships between the many races, which helps to stop the big bad. The creation and origins of the world hold a big part of the mystery of what's going on, but the party doesn't get the whole story in one place. I started writing the Imaginings universe here on Substack, and that means its origins as well. My very first Wandering Prompt story was the birth of the Demiurge after his star solidified. Well, again, I say this every week, but Jaden's answers are always one of my favorites to read because they're always so in-depth. And yes, I do think of Jaden, my friend, when I write some of these writing discussion topics. I always say to myself, I cannot wait to see what Jaden says. And once again, Jaden knocked it out of the park this week. I mean, so many amazing examples here of creation myths, and not only the creation myths themselves, but some really great advice here on how to implement them into the story or when to kind of pull back and leave the creation myth outside of the story until later. So really awesome advice there and a fantastic tour of all of Jaden's many, many worlds. I love it. Next up, Tales of Pictavia says, the planet my world is based on was partially created when one god killed his mother. He wanted to destroy her completely, so he burned her body in suns and then scattered her ashes on its land. Of course, she is a god too, so she can't be killed. Over the course of millennia, the ashes of her body are slowly trying to move back to each other to coalesce. Part of her body, though, are in the stone, the soil, and she got into plants and animals and then humans. It's a problem for them. Wow. I actually commented on this in the thread because when I saw it, I was like, holy cow, that is cool. No, I love that. I don't have a specific example. Obviously, I'm thinking of I want to say like in some comics there's been a similar kind of concept where a character who is essentially immortal and invincible is reduced to atoms and then has to slowly pull themselves back together piece by piece. I love that concept, and I love here how it's being done on a cosmic scale. I've never seen that. So that's really, really cool. Very, very invested in this world and immediately interested in how that plays into the larger story. Really great stuff. And honestly, a fantastic response to close off our discussion this week. Thank you, everyone. I love reading your answers every week. I love seeing the responses. And yeah, stay tuned. This coming Wednesday, we'll have a new writing discussion thread opening up in my subscriber chat. Please stop on by and share your thoughts so I can read them on the show here. All right. And now, coming up on the end of the episode here, we'll take a look at next week on Substack. All right, so next week on Substack here is hopefully going to be super productive for me. We shall see. I'm manifesting it. We'll start with our new power-up prompt tomorrow, July 11th, and this week is looking like it's going to be steampunk based on the poll. Now, just so you all know, you won't see a poll at the end of this next power-up prompt because the following week, I've got a guest prompt lined up that I'm really excited about, so stay tuned for more details there. But this coming week is looking like steampunk. This coming Monday, my new podcast, Dream Drafts, will be available to everyone. Episode 1 is about coming back from burnout. It's a combination of guided meditation and reflection on a quote in the episode. If you like the Mindful Moments segment of this podcast, that show is for you. And remember, paid subscribers will get early access to new episodes of Dream Drafts every Monday. Outside of that, I'm also interviewing the Halls of Pandemonium's lightweight bracket winner, M. Brandon Robbins, on next week's episode, as I mentioned at the beginning. You can submit questions for this interview if you want to ask him anything up until July 15th. Feel free to drop them in the episode's comments here or take a look at the show notes for a link to drop them in the thread. Either is fine, just let me know if you have any questions. Also, coming this week is July's live poetry reading stream with Stefan Pasic. I'll be streaming with him reading your poetry this coming Wednesday, July 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find a note and a subscriber chat thread as well to share your poems, and I'll include links to those in the show notes. We'll get through as many as we can. We're doing this every month. It's super fun, but if you can't make it, all good. I will post a recording along with links to all the poems, most likely the day after. And looking past all of that, I really want to kick things back into gear with Davine and my novel. This past week, I had 3 days just completely wiped out because contractors were here at the house working on the repairs. And yeah, I mean, you've all heard this many, many times, so I'm not going to rehash it, but 2 months ago now, over 2 months ago, I had a tree root grow into a pipe underground, so obviously I had no idea that it was happening. And then my garage flooded. My water got into the basement, and not clean water. I'll leave it at that. But, anyway, yeah, so that kicked off 2 months of a lot of stress and a lot of, money flying out the door that I was not expecting to spend. Yeah, needless to say, owning a house is exhausting, especially when you don't love the house that you're in. But that's a completely different tangent. In any case, stay tuned for news on those other projects soon. As soon as I get a chance to catch my breath, I'm going to dive right back into those. I haven't forgotten about Devine, despite what Finton will tell you. I'm also writing the story this week for Tamsin G's Cozy Quill writing competition. So that's going to take priority for me as well, but I'm really excited about that one. Got something really neat brewing there. But yeah, that's all I've got for you this week, my friends. Thank you for being here and for tuning in as always. And I'm wishing you all a safe and productive week of writing as always. This is Bradley Ramsey signing off.
Hey, Bradley, I think I know what J.M. Gooding's story was about from the intro.
Arnold, we already discussed it.
I know, but I think I found a deeper meaning.
Okay, and now you got me curious. What is it?
It's potatoes. It's gotta be about potatoes.
Why this? Oh, wait, are you saying that because Hazel's in it?
Yeah!
You know what? Something tells me they would agree with you. You might actually be onto something there.